Hey everyone, I'm Michelle and I draw comics, and this is the 10 Style Challenge. For those of you who don't know, the way this challenge works is you draw a character in your own style and then draw that same character in 10 styles from other media. Let's jump right in. We're starting with my own personal style, which is the style that I'm most comfortable drawing my boy Ethan in. Ethan's the main character in my comic, and he's a 14-year-old who tries to kill himself when we find out that he can't actually die. He's my go-to character for random drawing and doodles, and this is no different. I don't usually draw him in color though, because the comic's in grayscale, but it would feel really weird drawing a grayscale character and then comparing it to all these different coloring styles. I also realize now that I probably should have shaded him, but I really didn't want to spend any more time than I had to on my personal style when I still had all these other styles left to draw. I ended up using him as a color palette for all my other styles, so it works out pretty well that I didn't shade him. It made grabbing colors pretty easy. Next up is the Danganronpa splash art style. So I've seen a lot of people do the 10 style challenge, and I wanted to try doing less common styles than a lot of the ones that I've seen. A bunch of people have done the Danganronpa style, but it's always the sprite style. I've never seen someone do the splash art style, so I wanted to try it. I really love all the Danganronpa games. I always wanted to make a splash art because it's just such a unique style as far as anime and JRPG stuff goes. For references, I took a lot of the posing from Toko's pose in her splash art, while the hair and the hoodie were mostly styled off of Nagito. Story-wise, I had a hard time deciding what kind of ultimate Ethan would be. He's not really too good at much, but eventually I landed on him being an ultimate survivor. I know that there's already an ultimate survivor in Danganronpa, but Ethan's reason for being ultimate survivor would be different. Danganronpa is just wacky enough that I think I could pull off having Ethan be immortal in that universe too, but he doesn't need to be for this. The basic way that he would be the ultimate survivor is just that he would have been in many life or death situations and made it out alive. Almost like how Nagito's luck works, but he would also probably make it out of a killing game too, so you know. Either way, I had a lot of fun working in this style and I think it came out really good. Next up is the Let Me Explain Studio style, but it's extremely similar to all the other animated YouTubers' storyteller styles. This one was super quick and easy to do, but it was definitely by design. After all, the whole point of the style is to be easy to animate and draw, so no shocker there. This one took the least amount of time to draw out of all of them, and it shows. Next up is Neon Genesis Evangelion. This one was the hardest by far. I don't know what's going on with the proportions in Evangelion, but I definitely didn't notice how much of their bodies were just straight leg when I originally watched it. I seriously spent at least half an hour just trying to figure out the proportions on it, and it felt like no matter what I did, there still needed to be more leg. Another thing interesting about the style is that the clothes are very crinkly, I guess. There's a lot of folds and wrinkles in them, and they hang pretty loose. I was actually looking up references for the clothes, and there's a lot of official art of the characters in other clothes that helped a lot, and you could tell the creator had an interest in fashion. Unlike me, who dresses their main character in a hoodie and leaves it at that. I also had a bit of difficulty with the line art on this one because it's just so thin in the show, and I'm used to bigger lines with thickness and tapering, so that added to the frustration on this piece. The colors on my palette were a little too saturated too, so at the end I spent a few minutes messing with overlays to get the right look. It definitely took way too long to figure out, but I'm happy with how it ended up. Next up is Homestuck. I know when you first think of the Homestuck style, you think of the really simple sprite with no arms, but I wanted to do the sprite style that you see in a lot of the animated pages. It's still a really common sprite style in the comic, and I feel like it's really underappreciated. That said, this was a really easy and fun one for me, but it would have probably taken half the time if I had made up my mind on what to draw exactly. I wanted to draw Ethan in a god tier hoodie at first, but then I decided to later draw him as a troll instead. For the record, he would be a rogue of mind, for the reason that he can passively steal minds into his own, like how he does in the comic. As for what kind of troll he is, he's a Capricorn, so I made him a purple blood. There was a little more thought put into it than that, but not much. I could have technically given him a god tier hoodie and made him a troll, but I felt like changing his outfit and his species was a little too much for a style challenge. I also made him only have one horn because it's totally in character for him to have lost a horn, and also it was a good way to showcase his blood. Next is ReZero. At this point, you may or may not have realized that I've been going back and forth between complex styles and simpler styles, and that's how I really paced myself through all of these. Well, ReZero's style is deceptively simple compared to the other more complex styles like Evangelion and Danganronpa. The line art is simple and there isn't really much for shading or details. It's not a bad thing though. The emotion they can pull off with this style is absolutely fantastic, and it might be in part to the more simplistic sides of the style. You might be noticing the reference picture on the screen at this point. The reason why there wasn't any reference pictures before this was because I was using my phone for reference while I drew. But at this point, I had been streaming for 6 or 7 hours and my phone died. So on one monitor was most of my references, and then I put Subaru right there next to Clip Studio, where I would have had my phone normally on top of my tablet. This was also my last drawing of the night, so I was trying to rush through it before I could go to bed. That said, I think it came out pretty nice overall. With ReZero ending out my night, I woke up the next morning and immediately went back to drawing so I could finish out the last few styles. That said, I completely forgot to hit record until I already had done the sketch and line art for Star vs. the Forces of Evil, so unfortunately you guys can't see my process for that. Luckily it was only around 15 minutes of footage on a super simple style, but still, sorry about that. Star vs. has a very simple style and I breezed right through it. It's got that cartoony look to it, which helps all the characters be really expressive and fun. I kept on feeling like I should shade at least a little bit, but Star vs. has no shading in it unless it's for dramatic effect. I still like how it turned out. Next up is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which took me the most time out of any of the other styles. I've never been the biggest fan of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. It's a bit too much of a sausage fest for me, but I absolutely love how it looks. JoJo has such a distinctive style that was really fun to draw, but boy does it have insane detail. And it wouldn't really be JoJo without a pose, so I had to go all out for this one. Surprisingly, despite the crazy poses Araki goes for, the anatomy is usually pretty spot on, so I didn't have the same problems as I did with Evangelion's endless legs. I used a Josuke pose as a base for a reference, but that image only went down to his thighs, so I kind of had to make Ethan's legs up, using a mishmash of other references. I think it turned out okay though. One thing I noticed in my reference hunting is that a lot of characters in JoJo have hair that's different in the front than the back. Usually there's a different texture or style, so I tried that with Ethan when I did his hair. I also couldn't really find a character with a comparable enough hair, so I kinda had to wing it. I started this style very unconfident in my strokes, but the style itself kind of prevents that once you get into it. The whole style has this crazy energy to it. Once I stopped worrying about the base sketch, it felt like the line art just came naturally, which almost never happens. As for the coloring, there's cell shading, but it's got so many levels to it, it might as well not be cell shading anymore. After the coloring, it almost looked like the JoJo style, but everything in that show has this psychopop purple and pink feeling to it, so I played with overlays until I felt like it looked right. I used a lot of layer effects and gradients. Overall, it took a while to finish this one, but it was an absolute blast, and it's definitely my favorite out of the bunch. After the hard style that was JoJo, my next style was the indie game Later Alligator. This game is freaking adorable, and you should totally play it. I 100%ed it in less than 10 hours like a month and a half ago, and it's been stuck in my head ever since. I couldn't resist drawing my fictional child as an alligator from this game. I almost wanted to animate him, which is the real appeal of the style. They're just so adorable the way that they're animated. But that would have taken way too long for something like this. I might do it some other time. I still regret not animating him. There's not too much to this style, so just have an alligator Ethan, and I hope you enjoy him as much as I do. Next up is Kipo and the Age of the Wonder Beasts. This style kind of bugs me out with the proportions the same way that Evangelion does, but it's still streamlined for animation in a way that made it bearable. I wouldn't have to deal with the weird proportions if I had made Ethan a mute, but I felt the style was most recognizable with its human characters. The characters in Kipo also have much better style than my boy Ethan, and the complex clothing counteracts the simple style of the actual art to make it visually interesting, so I really felt like my art fell a little short. I think I nailed the hair though. One thing that sets Kipo apart from a lot of the animated styles I've seen so far is that it uses purple toned shading, whereas a lot of animation type styles just use a grayish shade. Just something I realized while looking through the references. Overall, this one didn't turn out as well as I would have liked, but I still think it's at least recognizable as the Kipo style. Last, but certainly not least, is the Don't Starve style. Don't Starve is my favorite game of all time, and I've sunk hundreds upon hundreds of hours into it. That said, this was my first time actually drawing in its style. While with most of the other styles I had to look at a lot of references to find out what I wanted, I knew what I wanted to do immediately for this one. I've played long enough that I have a good 90% of the skins available in Don't Starve Together, so I opened up the game and started playing dress up with all the characters. I wanted to do the style justice, and I ended up taking a lot of the facial structure from Walter, and I think it turned out alright. I had a great time with this one, and it was fantastic ending on this note. And that's all of them. I hope you liked the video, and tell me which one was your favorite style. Thanks for watching, and have a good rest of your day.